In 1910, the Airship America launched with the goal of crossing the Atlantic. If successful, the ambitious flight would have been the first time the Atlantic was crossed by air, and the airship was the first to have radio equipment on board. But this journey also made history for a different reason. A stowaway was discovered on board, a small gray cat that roamed around the airship's hangar. This is the story of the Airship America and Kiddo the Cat. Walter Wellman was a successful American journalist that formed the Wellman Chicago Record Herald Polar Expedition Company in 1905 with a $75,000 investment from his newspaper and with the support of Theodore Roosevelt. He commissioned the Goddard family in France, who were famous for their balloons, for a 165-foot airship. His goal was to fly to the North Pole, so he established a base and a hangar on Danes Island in Norway's Svalbard archipelago. After arriving at the base, the airship's engines failed and it was sent back to France to be modified. Now with a modified 185-foot balloon, Wellman tried again, multiple times, but his flights never made it past the 50-mile mark. Then, in 1909, a man named Robert Peary claimed to have reached the North Pole. This discouraged Wellman from continuing his attempts to fly to the North Pole, but he didn't give up, shifting his sights to accomplishing a transatlantic flight. Wellman's engineer, Melvin Vanneman, again modified the America to be 228 feet long and 52 feet in diameter. So now we'll talk about the balloon itself. Under the balloon is the car, which is a long catwalk, no pun intended, structure that served as fuel storage, an engine bay, a crew cabin, and in America's case, a radio station. In the car, the ship had two engines, allowing for one to run while the other underwent maintenance. Underneath the car was a 27-foot lifeboat, which will be important in a minute. Another interesting thing that the airship had was an equilibrator. This apparatus contained a series of tanks of gasoline that would be lowered into the water by a cable. And the idea was that as the temperatures cooled at night and the balloon began to lose lift, the tanks of gasoline would lower into the water and reduce their weight, and it acted as a passive alternative to dropping ballast. So it's a good thing that the America has this, and they won't have to do anything like throw an entire engine overboard to save weight. Surely that won't happen. The crew for the America was Melvin Vanneman as chief engineer, Frederick B. Albert and Lewis Loud as assistant engineers, Murray Simon as navigator, and Jack R. Irwin as radio operator. The sixth crew member, the hitchhiker, has conflicting stories as to how he got on board. The story that I think is the funniest is that he was a stray hangar cat that snuck aboard. The website for the National Air and Space Museum says that he was, quote, found in the ship's lifeboat as it was taking off, so that is one of the stories that is told. However, Alan Janus from the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum says, quote, I'm not sure whose cat Kiddo was. He may have been a stray who was adopted by America's crew, though Wellman said that he was the pet of one of the crew. So Kiddo might have been picked up and brought on board. Airships.net says Murray Simon picked the cat up as a mascot for luck. But however the cat got on board, the crew quickly seemed to want it gone. The cat was described as mewing, howling, and rushing around. Simon later recounted, quote, all the time we've been towed to sea, I am chiefly worried by our cat, which is rushing around the airship like a squirrel in a cage. I was at the wheel, and Jack Irwin, the wireless man, who was seated in the lifeboat suspended from the car of the airship, cried out to me, this cat is raising hell. I believe it's going mad. The first ever radio communication from an aircraft in flight was, quote, Roy, come and get this cat. The crew was getting desperate, and being men of science, they found a solution. They stuffed Kiddo in a bag, tied it to a rope, and tried to lower it to a boat of journalists that was following them. This handoff was unsuccessful, and Kiddo was hauled back on board. Kiddo eventually settled down, but the flight did not. 4 hours in, one of the engines failed, and it became necessary to use the second engine already. However, as it became dark, it became obvious that the engine was throwing out sparks, creating a fire hazard. Luckily for them, the weather and fog made enough moisture that it was unlikely that the balloon would catch fire. Unluckily for them, the weather only got worse. 2 days in, they found it necessary to jettison weight to stay in the air. Unfortunately, they had to throw Kiddo the Cat into the Atlantic Ocean. I'm kidding, they jettisoned the broken engine and some fuel. A storm then pushed them off course, way southward. After 71 hours and 1,008 miles, the crew contacted a nearby steamship with a Morse lamp and evacuated the airship on a lifeboat. The crew was then rescued by the steamship, the SS Trent, and returned to New York. The America drifted off and crashed off the coast of Maryland. At this point, life for Kiddo was pretty great. The Smithsonian says, quote, according to the airship's navigator, Murray Simon, Kiddo preferred the seafaring portion of the journey. He described Kiddo as perched in the lifeboat's sail, washing his face in the sun, a pleasant picture of feline content. Upon returning to New York, Kiddo became a mini celebrity, taking part in pictures and even getting to stay in a cushioned crate in a Gimbel's department store. Kiddo's life of adventure was over, and he retired, going to live with Walter Wellman's daughter. Kiddo was the first cat to attempt to cross the Atlantic by air, and was also the subject of the first ever radio communication by air. Kiddo and the America's flight set a record for the longest sustained flight at that time. Murray Simon wrote, quote, we sacrificed our airship, but we saved our lives, and above all, as Mr. Wellman and Mr. Vanneman will show when they write their technical reports, we have gathered a vast amount of useful knowledge which will help largely in the solution of big problems relating to the navigation of the air. And we also saved the cat. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. My upload schedule will be rough for a few months, so I'm going through my last year of school, doing 18 credit hours, capstone lab work, and also taking care of a puppy. It's been difficult finding time to make these videos, but I still plan on keeping this channel going. It'll just be a bit of a slow period. I'll try to make at least one video a month, and the videos might be more geared towards some of the concepts for my schoolwork, like orbital mechanics or propulsion, just so I can make videos and pretend like I'm studying at the same time. Again, thanks for watching. Bye.